Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this is a bonus video for this Express to-dos build. So basically, in this bonus video, we're going to implement user authentication. Okay, so we're going to implement user authentication. Cool. Okay, so let's actually do that. So what I am going to do is I'm going to make a branch. Okay, so I'm going to create a branch. Express git checkout -b. That means to make a new branch, and we're going to call this branch auth, or we'll call it feature auth. So this way you can still see on the main branch, you'll see the code that's at the end of the main 4-part video, but here on the branch you can see the authentication. Okay, so we are now in a branch called feature auth. Wonderful. And we're going to make some architectural changes. Okay, so before, every route was here on the main router. Okay, so I'm going to make a couple quick changes. One, what I'm going to do is the main route, which would take us to the index route, I'm actually going to make that /todo. Okay, which shouldn't interfere with any of the other routes. So that's all well and good. The reason is I'm going to make a new router because I'm going to want to isolate the routes for when you're not logged in and make all these main routes. You'll see we're going to make them where you have to be logged in to use them. Okay, so in that case, I want to be able to isolate these two routes, the routes that need to be logged in and the routes that don't need to be logged in. So main routes, you have to be logged in to access those when we're all said and done. So I'm going to make a new router. So we'll call this const, we'll call it onauth for like an unauthenticated onauth routes equals express.router. Okay, and then I'm going to make a new heading down here for those particular routes. Okay. There you go, and then see how I mark this out. Oh, I see what I did. Okay. Unauthenticated routes. Because again, just so that way I organize my routes between the routes that require login and those that don't. So we have that section there. And we're going to have at least the main page is now going to be an unauthenticated route. So we're going to have onAuth routes dot get slash, and I'm going to make a new controller for these routes. So we're going to have the onAuth controller, which we'll create in a second. And we'll just say we'll basically that main page will be called main. So we'll have a function called main. Okay. Again, this onAuth controller doesn't exist yet, but we'll make it in a second. Other changes I want to make here. We'll eventually add middleware. So let's start with that. Let's just set up the unauthenticated controller. So I'm going to go to controllers and make a new controller, new file. Call it onAuth controller.js. And then I'm just going to kind of copy this, the same setup as here. Okay, paste that into unauthenticated controller, except now this is going to be onAuth controller. The class is called onAuth controller. Let me get rid of all these methods. Again, the only method we really want is right now is main recres, which we will use to render a res.render, let's say a main.ejs for like the main page. And I don't think I really need any, yeah, I don't think we need any props in there or any kind of data. So that should do the job there. And then let me go back and connect this new controller. So I'm going to go import this controller. import on auth controller. So that's imported. Then just like we instantiated the other controllers, I'll create the an instance on auth controller equals new on auth controller. And there we go. Now I have that all set up. So I have all my unauthenticated routes that I can track here. Okay, eventually we're also going to have a sign up post route and a login post route. So we'll have these will both be post. This one will be sign up. And then this one will be copy that, paste that. We'll also have a login route. And I'll just, to keep it simple, I'll keep both forms on that main page. Okay, just because again, here's just to demonstrate sort of like the logic, the workflow of it. You can break it up into multiple pages if you want. Cool. So now let me go add those methods to the controller, on auth controller. And I'll just add some dummy routes. So sign up, rec res. And right now we'll just have res.send sign up. And then we'll do the same thing for login. Login rec res res.send login. Okay, nice. So that's all set. And cool. Now there's a couple libraries I do want to install. Okay, one of them, let's just kind of give you a quick tour of what we're going to need. So I'm going to head over here to npmjs.com where you can see all the different npm libraries. What I'm going to want is called Express Session. Express Session, what it does, it basically makes it really easy to set up a session cookie. A session cookie is essentially a cookie that that's going to be on the user's computer that's going to allow us to, we're going to basically save a little blotch of information for anybody who's accessing the website that's attached to a session in their browser. So as long as they show us their cookie, we know which little blotch of information belongs to the person who's accessing the website. This is going to allow us to keep track of data between requests, so that way I can keep track of like, hey, is the user logged in, or what's their username between requests. Okay, because we have this little bucket of information for any request coming from that browser session. That's essentially what a session cookie does. Okay, so that's express.session. Okay, so I'm going to want to install that. So npm install express session. I also going to want some Mongo middleware because you can just save the session in memory by default and just use express session, and that's fine. The problem is what happens when the server restarts. If the server restarts while the user is running, and also runs into some issues with Heroku. So you generally are going to want to store that session data in a database of some sort. So if you take a look at the Express Session documentation, what's really nice is that they have a lot of plugins that allow you to plug in whatever database you want to store that session data in. Okay, so we can go scroll down here. It'll actually give us like a list of the libraries, like, yep, right here. Okay, so pretty much any database you can think of, there's a connector. I'm going to be using Mongo, so let me find the Mongo. Oh, they have an Arango one. That's interesting. Yeah, well, they've added a lot. Mongo. Here we go. Connect Mongo. Okay. So we're going to be using that as well. Okay, and let me go back to here to connect Mongo. So I'm going to install these two libraries. Cool. So those are now installed. So I can just always double check your package.json to make sure they installed correctly. And yep, there they are. Connect Mongo and Express Session. Wonderful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the documentation to get this kind of set up. Okay, and we see here, like, they give you like the little story of how you set it up. Okay, so I can literally just pretty much copy. First I want to copy the imports. Okay, so I'm going to go bring that over to server.js. And I'm just going to add that to all my other imports. Import session in Mongo store. And then we're going to register the session middleware. And we just add that to all our other middleware. And I'm going to add that right before our routers. You generally always want the routers at the bottom of your middleware. Okay, and yeah, that should be fine. Actually, the thing, do I want it earlier on? I think I do want it earlier, because that way, in case I do want to access, if I decide I want to access the session in my custom middleware later on, I don't think I will need to, but just in case I have that option. Because again, basically the middleware runs in the order that you write it. So in that case, the session won't exist. Like there's actually going to be a part of your request object called sessions, like rec.session. That's the little blotch of information you're saving. But it doesn't exist till the middleware is run. So in that case, the earlier I have the middleware run, the earlier that object exists inside request. So I'll put it after Morgan. Again, not a big deal, as long as I have it before the routers. But yeah, so basically what this is doing is that you can choose a secret key. The secret key is going to be something it uses like to kind of lock away the cookie. So generally this should be a unique string. Ideal world, you should be using a environmental variable. So I should be adding to my .env here and be doing like a, we'll say like, you know, secret. Okay, secret equals, just say cheese, just to demonstrate. And then basically that would then go here. So I'd be like process.env.cheese. Okay, so that way, no, not that cheese, that's secret. And I forget, did I make that all uppercase? I think I did. .env, yep, it's all uppercase, so that should be process.env.secret. Okay, and this way people can't see what your secret is in your code, especially for production. Then we have our Mongo store create options. Okay, so we have those options we're probably going to need to change in a second because we're going to want to pass it like a URL. So let's take a look at some of these other examples. Mongo store create. See below, I don't really need to have any particular options I want to pass. We're just going to want to pass it the same URL that we passed for Mongo. Okay, so I'm just going to go over here. Just to read that again. Mongo store create, and it's passing it an object. So pass this right here like that. And then again, I will just use the Mongo URI. So process, and let's see here. Did I ever say that into its own variable? I think I did at some point. Yep, we did right here, Mongo URI. So I can just use that over here, Mongo URI. Okay, and then that should be set. The only issue I can anticipate is that when I did the video, it was a couple days ago. So the username I used for Mongo, that database connection should have expired by now. So I'm going to need to recreate that. So I'm going to head over to mongodb.com. And I want to sign in. Okay. Express at, if I can remember what the password was. Do I have it saved? No, that one's not saved. Okay, so let's see here. Let's see if I am right. I am probably going to have to reset the password. So I will be right back. Okay, so now I got that set up. Express, reset. Okay, so we're logging in. And that's going to take us to the dashboard. And again, I just need to create like a new, so we get the database access. So you see like that user I made before is gone. So I'm just going to remake it. I'll just use the same username and password. So I'm just head over to .env, and the username was cheese and the password was cheese. So we'll just recreate that. Cheese, just make sure this still says cheese, good. And again, I want to limit this to make this temporary, and 6 hours is fine. Okay, good. That's all I needed. Wonderful. Okay. So that's set there. Okay. So now we have Express session all configured. then that wasn't too bad. Okay. Now the next piece, what I need to do is I need to create a model for tracking users. So we had a model for tracking to-dos, but I need a model for tracking users. So I'm gonna head back to my server.js and go to where my models were. So let's see where that was. So to-do model object. So I'm just gonna call this model objects. Change it to that. Okay, because we're also going to need to create a user. So user schema equals new mongoose dot schema, and basically every user is going to have a username, which will be a string. So type string, but I also want to make sure it's required. So required is going to be true, and every username should be unique. So that must also be true. Okay, good. Every user should have a password. Password will be of type string, which reminds me of another thing we need to install. String, and as required, you have to have a password. Okay, and then that's good for that. And then to-dos are going to have a username attached. That's how we're going to track which users have which to-dos. So that way, only logged in users only see their to-dos. So we have a way of tracking that. There's different ways you can do this. I find this to be sort of the easiest way to do it with Mongo. Just be like, okay, look up to-dos by username. So username, which will be a string. Okay, and then I need a little comma there. Perfect. And then I just need to make sure we have a user user controller. User equals mongoose dot model user schema. And there we go. Now we have our user model. Good. So that wasn't so bad. So we just create a new schema, and then we create a new model. And again, previously I packaged the models through the middleware. So I'm going to continue doing the same. So not only are we going to include the to-do model, we're going to include the user model. So that way that all the routes have access to it via the request object. Because I'm nesting all the models in the request object. And every route has access to the request object. And this middleware is running before all of the routes. Okay, cool. So that's going to do what I needed to do. Next thing I want to do, let's see here. Okay, so we created the users to do. Oh, we need to get the bcrypt. So npm install bcrypt.js. So the thing is that you don't want to store the actual raw passwords in your database, because then someone hacks into your database, they can get all your users' passwords. So you generally want to encrypt your passwords. That's what bcrypt's for. So literally they have a copy of bcrypt in every language. You generally always look for that bcrypt library to decrypt and encrypt passwords. Okay, so there we go. So we should have all the tools we need so we can begin setting up. So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to start setting up this page so that we have these forms set up. So I'm going to head over to views, and I'm going to add that main.ejs that that points to. So new file, main.ejs. Okay, I'm going to go copy from the other EJS files. So that way it has all the includes. No need to reinvent the wheel. Okay, and yeah. So let me clear this out, the to-dos app. And again, we don't want you creating to-dos or seeing to-dos until you log in. So what we're going to do is we're going to have two divs. Okay, and we'll have this one called the ID of login or sign up. Sign up should go first. And then in this sign up, we'll have a form. And in the form, we'll have our input. Okay, text, type equals text. Name equals username. And we should just put placeholder. username, just so that way it helps hint to users as what should be going in there. Username. And then let's do one for password. Except this should be of type password, because that actually like hides what the user's typing in there, so that way it's not shown on the screen. The name of the field should be password. And we should also put password as the placeholder, so that way, as the placeholder, so that way you see it when there's nothing typed in there. Password makes it easier for the user to know what they need to type in there. Then of course a submit button. Input type equals submit, and the value of the submit button should be sign up. Okay, and this is literally going to be pretty much the exact same form we need for login, so I can just like copy this form again. We can make our lives easy with cut and paste, so why not? Okay, and now everything should be the same, except this is going to be login. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to want to, actually no, let me undo all that, because I want to copy the div too. So I want this whole div. Okay, and let me just change the parts that need to be changed to, well, that just should be changed to login. Okay. And then I guess we should probably have some sort of heading in here. So H2 login form. And this should say login. And then same thing, we'll just kind of add an H2 here as well. Sign up form. And the only other thing we need is like the action and method. So the action, it's going to be when you submit this form, the URL should be submitting to is /signup, because we created that route earlier. And the method for that route is post, so I don't have to worry about method override or anything. Post, and then same thing here, action equals /login, and the method is post. And again, all these names are arbitrary. It's just a matter of how we wire these things up, just making sure that, you know, I'm referring routes that I've defined, and then those routes are all created. As long as everything's just sort of like connects and everything is consistent, everything will work. Cool. Let's actually run this so we see the form just fine. npm run dev. Oop, that's a crash. Class constructor cannot be invoked without new. Oops, it looks like I forgot the new keyword in server.js. So let's go fix that. Yay for errors being descriptive. Where did we create that? Oh, yep, I did forget the new keyword here. There we go. And now everything seems to be working. Okay, now let's take care of some of these little like warnings telling me, hey, everything's working, but you know, we want you to define these options here on your sessions middleware. So let's just take care of that real quick. So like resave just means like, do you want the session cookie to be resaved every time a user accesses the site, even though nothing has changed? I'm going to say false. Not that it really matters. Save on initialize. That's like, you know, if there's no change in data and there was no cookie before, should we still make the cookie? Sure, why not? Okay, and see now I get none of those little warnings anymore. Okay, I gave it what it wanted. Okay, cool. And now let's go to the page and see in, wait one moment, what port? 3000. So let's just do that. So local host 3000 cannot get slash. Let me go take a look at my, oh, I don't think I ever registered the auth. So I created the routes, and we created the router, but we never actually registered the auth router. Okay, I'm going to just be like app.use. Just like the main routes, it'll play off of slash, so we'll just do that, and on auth routes. There we go. That should do it. Okay. And there we go. So see, now we see the sign up and the login form. So let's just check. So technically it should submit to that sign up route. Even though I haven't fleshed it out, the route does exist. It just sends back the word sign up. But let's try this out. Like Alex Merced, cheese, sign up. Sign up. Okay, good. So it's doing what we expect it to do. Okay, so all is well. So now we just have to actually implement the sign up and login. So we go back to our onAuth controller to implement sign up and login. And essentially what's going to happen is we want to create a new user. Okay, so I'm going to go grab that user model, first things first. So const user equals rec.models.user, because again, I use that middleware to stash the user model in there, so that way I don't have to be like importing and exporting. And I'll just do the same thing here because we'll get to that later. Okay, cool. So now once I have the user model, what I want to do is go grab the username and password from the form data. Okay, and again, all the data from the form is going to be stored in rec.body. So I'm going to use object destructuring to grab those two variables much easier instead of doing 2 lines. Okay, so I can be like, hey, I'm going to give you an object and I want you to pull out the username and password and put them into their own variable. The object I want you to pull it out of is rec.body. There you go. And now technically, I have a username and password variable, standalone variable that are made up of the username and password property rec.body. That feature is called object destructuring. So if you're not familiar with that JavaScript feature, I have I think a good 40-minute video where I show all the cool things you can do with destructuring. It's one of my favorite JavaScript features. Okay, so const username rec.body. Good. So now what we want to do though, let me think here. Actually, maybe I'm not going to do that. The reason being is that I'm going to want to encrypt the password. Okay, so I need to actually import bcrypt. Okay, from bcrypt. Is that what wants me to encrypt it? Just want me to, should it just be from bcrypt.js? There we go. Okay. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to pull out the username. So I'll keep this line and just pull out the username, because the password we're going to do something else with. Const password. Okay, equals bcrypt dot hash sync. Now hash, there's hash and hash sync. Hash means a hash a password, which means just turn it into a, you ever seen like corned beef hash? So it's a bunch of like corned beef that's just chopped up into a lot of little pieces and looks like a big mess. That's essentially what they're going to do with the password. Make it look like a big mess. They're hashing the password. Hash is asynchronous because it could take some time to hash the password depending on how you set up the function. So you could do it asynchronously so you don't have to pause your whole application. If you're doing this for the first time, it's probably simpler to just do it synchronously. So that's what the sync function does. It does it synchronously, which means your whole app just kind of pauses until it's done. Okay, so it'll hash the password, and if it takes a while, everything just kind of stops until it's done. So you don't have to worry with like promises or anything like that. Okay, when you do things asynchronously, then you're dealing with promises and worrying about things like async await. And again, to keep this simple, I'm just going to do this synchronously. But just so you understand why I'm choosing that one. Okay, hash sync. Okay, and see, like I can see, VS Code tells me that the first thing it takes is the string, which should be the password. Okay, and then the salt is going to be just something to kind of like to be something that's going to a number or a string that it can just jumble it based on. Okay, which we're going to just use the number 10, which you'll see a lot because it's just a good number to use. Okay, now, so I'm going to pass the password, so rec.body.password. That's the string that I want to hash. And we're going to use a salt factor of 10. And then there we go. Okay, that's gonna hash the password. So now I have a hashed version of the password. I have the username both in their own variable. So now I can go and create the user. So I'm going to say user.create, and then I'm going to pass it the new user. So pass in the username and password. And then again, just like always when we're using Mongo models, we have this callback that receives the error, or in this case, the user. Okay, and what this will do is going to res.redirect back you to the main page because you have to log in. Res.redirect to main page. Okay, there's sign up. So that's the sign up route. That's all it does. Okay, we're basically using the user model, getting the username and password of the user, and then just creating a new user in our database. Okay, wonderful. Now we need to figure out what you're going to do, what happens when you log in. We know that the form is working. The form is set up. So we're going to generally just kind of do the same thing. Except what's going to happen is that once we get the user model, we will pull out the password. This time we will use destructuring. So username, password from rec.body. Rec.body. And first thing I want to do is I want to see if the user actually exists in the first place. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to say user.find, and I want to find the user that has the username that matches the username that we just pulled out. So I pass that in. It's an object with the property of username, and it's going to see if that username matches the username variable. Now then we pass in the callback error user. So it's either going to find the user or it's not. Okay, so if there's no user, okay, so first we should probably, technically I should probably handle the errors and do like the if error thing. So let me go borrow that if statement. Technically I should be all, cover all my bases. So let's do that first for the login here. Okay. Then I will do the same thing over here. Make sure there's no error. And again, if there's no error, I still care, like, hey, did you actually find a user? So I'm still going to check again, like, if there is a user. And then else. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to send back an error message. So res.status 400.send an object that says error. And it's going to say user doesn't exist. Okay. Okay, so basically I'm checking, hey, if there was no user found, that means that user doesn't exist, and that's the reason why the login didn't work. Then now we want to check is the password match. So what we're going to do is we're going to say const password check equals the result of bcrypt.compare. And the reason we're using bcrypt compare is because, again, stored in our database isn't the actual password. It's like the hashed password, this big, chopped up little diced up version of the password. So I can't just say, hey, does this string equal this string? I need to find some way to mathematically compare the hashed version of the password with the string that the user just typed in the login form. So this compare function does just that. So I want to say I want to compare password, that's the one that the user typed in, with user.password. So that's, again, that user is the object, the user object we just pulled from the database because we just did that user.find function. And hopefully we found a user. Okay, so what this is going to do is that it is going to, I want to do compare sync, because again, we want to do this synchronously so that we don't have to worry about things like promises and whatnot. Okay, and this is going to return a Boolean. So either that check is successful or it's not successful. So I can now use that in an if statement. So another if statement. So if password check, so if password check is either going to be true or false. If it's true, then technically you should log in, and we'll do that in a second. Else, then I'm going to want to send you another error, but this one saying that your password is wrong. So then I'll copy this message here. Okay, and we're going to say wrong password. Okay, and then basically, if all looks good, okay, if everything looks good, then what we're going to want to do is we're going to add some properties to the session. Okay, so now we have the session variable that's in our request object because we have the session middleware, and I can just stash data in it. So I'm going to stash the username in it. Again, you can stash whatever you want in here. I just usually I'll put the username in here so that way we have that for when we add other items. So rec.session.username equals username. Rec.session.loggedin equals true, so that we have a little flag that you're logged in or not. Technically, I could just check if the username is defined or not, but never hurts to have the flag. And then I'm going to want to redirect you. res.redirect to /to-do. And let me just confirm that that's the right. So let's go back to server.js for a moment. So server.js /to-do, yep. Okay. Cool. /to-do. Yeah, and then we should be able to log in and log out. Now the only thing is, I want to make sure that before I do the last piece, I want to make and try it out. What I want to do is make sure that when I go look at the page, I'm only seeing the to-dos that are associated with my user. So I just need to update one of our already pre-existing routes in the main controller, and that's going to be, well, actually I need to update 2 routes. I need to update the index route, because the index route should only be finding not just any to-do now. It should be only to-dos that match my username, which we now have stored in rec.session.username if I'm logged in. Okay, so that'll check to see if, hey, is there any users that match? And then when we create, we want to add the username. So we're going to also say like rec.body.username equals rec.session.username. So that way, technically, that object's going to have that username properly defined. Because it's not in the form. We're not going to ask them to type the username of the form. What user would do that? Having to type, like, hey, here's my to-do list and my username. We saved the username in session, so now we can use it on every request. Because again, that's the beauty of a session cookie. It allows us to reuse data on multiple requests. So technically, we should be all set. I mean, we don't have logout functionality yet, but that's not hard to implement. But let's just try this out. I guess I should probably create a logout button real quick. So I'll just create one more function here. And that's just going to be logout rec.res. Okay, and basically what this does is just going to take the rec.session. I think it's like destroy, or is it? Pretty sure session should have a destroy method. Let me just look at the session documentation again. Rolling, save and initialize, and set rec.session. Session. Here we go. Yep, just session destroy. And there's a callback. Okay. So session.destroy. Okay. And then basically we'll just do is just res.redirect you back to the main page. So that means, and then the callback just runs once it's done destroying the session. Okay, let me just make sure that that's the right signature. Yep, that looks good. Okay. Okay, and then technically there's an error that's passed in, so I should probably check for the error. But I'm not going to. Okay, so log out. Now I just need to attach that to a route. Server. Server. So on auth routes. Actually, yeah. On auth routes. Dot delete. Make it a post route so that I don't have to worry about method override. Dot post / logout. And it'll be on auth controller dot logout. Okay, so that route is, so these routes are all accounted for. So now I really just need a logout button. So I'm going to add that on the main to-do page, or on the index EJS. We'll just add a logout button next to the create to-do button. So I'll just copy and paste this button. Not going to be the prettiest thing in the world, but it's fine. Okay, and the problem is I can't use just a normal button. I need a form. So let me go copy the delete button from show.ejs. So there we go. Just avoid having to retype everything completely. Okay, and again, this is just going to be going to logout method post, and the button will just say logout. Okay. So now we should have this all set up. Okay, so now if I say refresh the page, if I go Alex Merced, password cheese, I hit sign up. Okay, theoretically I signed up, but refresh the page so quickly you didn't see it. Then I'm going to do Alex Merced cheese to log in. And interesting. Okay, so this particular error here, basically whenever you see these Mongo errors, you'll see like they come with like a number code. Usually what you do is you look up that number code and you'll get some more details on what it is. This looks like it's still trying to create a new user, so I may have that login form set up wrong. So let's head over to my main.ejs. Let's take a look. Action/login, action/sign up. So that looks good. So let's go to server.js /login/sign up, and see they are both still pointing to the sign up function. Okay, because again, why would it be complaining that there's a user already called Alex Merced? Is because it's trying to create another user named Alex Merced. So that tips me off that the issue is somewhere that the login is triggering the sign up stuff. So I go back and take a look, and yeah, we see that I originally had the sign up method for both of these. So that should fix that. Okay, so let me go back over here and refresh. Well, let's see what happens if I try a wrong password. So I'll type in bread. Okay. That's not exactly what I expected. Let's see what happened here. Illegal arguments, string undefined. Okay, so that means that tells me that it got to that compare line, but there was no user, so it had an issue with undefined. But let's see why. Log in. If password check. So it gets to here, but it shouldn't have found a user object. So let's see here. Let's console log the user object that it gets back so we can see what it's getting back when it doesn't find. Well, actually, it found a user, but why didn't it compare password successfully? Because it says error legal argument supposed to be a string, but we got back undefined. So we're gonna console log that, and we're gonna console log password, because one of these two things is undefined. Because these are the two arguments that compare sync, and again, the argument's complaining that the call to compare sync, one of these two arguments is not a string as it should be. I'm not sure which one. So we'll console log user and password, even though I accidentally put that over here. User and password. And we're going to do it again. We know it's going to error. That's fine. Cancel. Let's go back. We know it's going to error, but the goal is to figure out why it's erroring. So Alex Merced, hello. Okay, so that errored. But let's take a look at those console logs now. So there's the user object, and oh, I always make this mistake. Okay, so you see what happened here is like, look, it's an array. The user object is an array. It's not the actual object. Because whenever you use the find method in Mongo, it gets you an array of items because it doesn't know if it's going to find one or many. So it always gives you back an array. What I really wanted to use, because I only plan on finding one user, is the find one method. Okay, so there we go. So see, oftentimes just going back and just double checking your variables and console logging them helps you identify the problem, and just making sure you're paying very close attention to what should be having a clear idea of what the console log should be console logging versus what it's actually console logging. Okay, you always have to kind of not just log things, but think about like what should I see in the terminal before it actually logs, because then that's how you know that's something wrong if you see something different than what you expected. Okay, so let's go back and do that again. So Alex Merced, hello. So I should be getting like the wrong password error. Wrong password, perfect. And let's see if I do like a fake username, AlexMerced1, but right password, user doesn't exist. Okay, so good. Our messages are working fine. I go Alex Merced and I say cheese, which was the right password. And here we go. And I can go create to-dos. Okay. Oh, that didn't do what I expected it to. Oh, because the redirect us to slash. So let's go fix that because that's from before when slash was the main page. So I need to change these to also slash to do. All these redirects to do. I think there's only like 2 or 3 of these. To do. And I think we're good now. Okay, so this is why it's always good to test things. Alex Merced, cheese. Okay, there's that to do I made. I'll create a couple more. Okay, cool. So there's 3 to dos. Now I'm going to log out. Okay, and then I am going to make a new user. We'll just say AL cheese. Okay, now if I log in as that user, AL cheese, see this user doesn't have any to-dos. If I log out and log back in as Alex Merced, cheese, Alex Merced still has his to-dos. Okay, even though they changed, interestingly enough. Okay. But it's for the most part working. Let's see here. Let's try that one more time again. Merced cheese. Interesting. Why is it bringing me back those? Let me go back to the main controller and take a look at the index route. rec.session.username. So that's telling me that maybe the rec.session.username didn't get saved correctly. So let's console log that. rec.session. Let's just console log the whole session. And we log out. Log back in again. Cheese. Okay, so that time it worked. So that's just weird. Okay, but I see here, like I logged the session. Okay, and we can see that the use session, well, that's the user object now. Let's go further down. See, there's the session object, which has the cookie data, but then the other things that I saved in it. Username, logged in, true. Which we haven't used this logged in. We have used the username because I'm using that to tag the to-dos that you make. But I haven't used this logged in property. So this is where creating custom middleware comes in. Because I don't want users, when they're logged out, to be able to just type in here /to-do and be able to go to the to-do page and be like, okay. Okay, so that's what you see when you're not logged out, because those are the to-dos we made before. Okay, so I'm going to log out. And what I want to change is where you can't do that. Okay, you have to log in. So the way to do that is we need to have a middleware. But that middleware I only want running when we go to the pages that are on main routes. So that's why I call these unauth routes, because you should be able to access them whether you're logged in or logged out. Like, it doesn't really matter. These routes, the to-do pages, you should only be able to access when you're logged out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a special middleware for the main routes. So main routes.use. I'm going to say rec res next. And it's just going to check to see if you're logged in. So it's just going to check if rec.session.loggedin, that's true, then it's just going to let you just go by. Okay, else, what it's going to do is just going to redirect you back to the main page because you need to log in. Okay, and then that's it. That's all that middleware is going to do. It's just checking, hey, if you're logged in, let the route work like normal. If not, then redirect you back to the main page. So this way, if I'm logged out, so now that I'm logged out, and if I try to type in over here, like /to-do, see, it just takes me back to the main page. So the only way I'm going to get inside there is if I log in with the correct username and password. Although I typed the password wrong. So cheese, wrong password again. There we go. Okay, and there you go. Okay, so we've added user authentication. Now each user can have their own to-dos, and each user can all using sessions. So that's the basic premise of authentication. There's another way of doing it using what's called a JWT token, JWT token, which is generally the same idea. The only difference is instead of having like the proof that you logged in being stored in the session cookie, which is being stored on the session data, which is being stored on the server, you'll give the user a cookie, which is being stored on the client side, and the client will then submit it inside their headers when they make HTTP requests. That's a little bit more complicated, but I have other videos with React projects and Vue projects where I implement authentication with those frameworks. So I'll refer you to those. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy that. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy. Do like and subscribe.